The moment I received the first message, I was standing beside my wedding cake, smiling for photographs while my new husband stood close behind me. His hand rested gently on my back, and the ballroom around us was glowing under soft golden lights. For the first time in years, I felt like everything in my life had finally settled into place. Then my phone vibrated again, and again, and again, pulling me out of that moment before I even understood what was happening. "What did you do?" was the first message. I stared at it, confused, still trying to hold on to the joy of the moment, before I could respond. Another message appeared saying she is losing control. Then another saying the country club is demanding answers. I slowly lifted my eyes from the screen, trying to understand how anything outside this room could possibly be falling apart on a day like this. Around me, guests were laughing, glasses were clinking, and music was playing softly. Everything looked perfect, but inside me something cold began to form as I realized my family was not simply busy or delayed. They had chosen not to be here. My name is Natalie Morgan, and that night I understood something I had spent my entire life refusing to see. In my family, I was never the priority. I was the solution. I was the one who fixed problems quietly so no one had to face consequences. I was a major in the United States Air Force, responsible for operations that required precision, leadership and discipline, yet at home none of that mattered. What mattered was that I always showed up when something went wrong and never asked for anything in return. I grew up in a small town in Georgia where my father Daniel Morgan believed that attention was the only form of value that mattered. My older sister Brianna had that naturally. She was charming, popular, and effortless in the way she drew people toward her. Every mistake she made was forgiven before it was even fully understood. I was different. I stayed focused on structure, discipline, and building a future that extended beyond our hometown. While she chased attention, I chased stability. While she collected admiration, I built a career. Even when I succeeded, it never seemed to reach them. When my mother needed an expensive surgery, I quietly paid for it without telling anyone. At the hospital, my father proudly thanked Brianna for being supportive while I stood in the background unnoticed. When my father's business began collapsing because of poor financial decisions, I used my savings and connections to keep everything from falling apart. He told everyone the recovery happened naturally. My name was never mentioned, not once. That pattern followed me into adulthood. Every holiday meant the same thing. Brianna was praised for simply being present, while I was given responsibility for fixing whatever crisis had appeared. I convinced myself it would change someday, that loyalty and sacrifice would eventually earn recognition. I was wrong. Everything shifted when I met Caleb Turner, a military doctor stationed overseas. He never looked at my strength as something to use. He never expected me to carry everything alone. On one of our early dates, I apologized for checking work messages during dinner. He simply looked at me and said I did not need to make myself smaller for anyone. It was such a simple sentence, but it stayed with me because no one in my life had ever said anything like it before. 2 years later, he proposed during a quiet trip to the beach. There were no crowds, no performance, no pressure, just the sound of waves and a promise between two people who understood each other. For the first time, I believed I might be stepping into a life where I would finally be valued instead of used. When I told my family, I expected some tension, but not what came next. At a family gathering, my sister Brianna suddenly announced her own engagement with full excitement and attention from everyone at the table. Then, she revealed that she had scheduled her engagement celebration on the exact same day as my wedding. The room went silent for a brief moment, but no one questioned it. My father simply leaned back and said people would have to choose which event they wanted to attend. That single sentence told me everything I needed to know. My wedding was not being forgotten, it was being replaced. Over the following weeks, relatives began calling me asking if I could adjust my date or compromise. Not a single person asked Brianna to change hers. When my father called and told me that my sister needed more support than I did, something inside me finally stopped breaking and started becoming clear. This was not misunderstanding. This was a pattern I had been trapped in my entire life. I realized then that my family's stability had never been natural. It had been quietly supported by me all along. Mortgage payments, emergency loans, business debts, medical bills, everything had been handled silently without anyone connecting it back to me. I was the invisible foundation holding everything together while being treated as if I contributed nothing. Months later, my father came to my home. He looked older and tired in a way I had never seen before. We sat in silence until he finally admitted he had always thought I did not need appreciation because I was strong enough to live without it. I told him that strength had never meant invisibility. Before leaving, he told me he was proud of me. It was the first time I ever heard those words from him in a way that felt real, even if it arrived far too late. After he left, I stood by the window while Caleb held me quietly. My phone lit up with one final message from my father saying he loved me and always had. I did not respond right away. I simply looked at it and understood something important. Forgiveness does not erase the past, and healing does not require pretending it never happened. Sometimes freedom begins the moment you stop carrying people who never noticed the weight you were holding, and for the first time in my life, I finally understood what it meant to no longer be disposable.